Within the space of Saturn's rings, the Scribbler advance force hung in disarray. Their 5-to-1 ratio nearly won them the invasion if it were not for the human defense force. With no actual sentience, working on pure instinct and overwhelming numbers, the animal-like Scribbler pods had fought hard and long against the combined human nomad fighting force. Nearly 99% of the Scribbler pods were now floating aimlessly amongst the icy and rocky bodies of the gas giant's ring. Captain Horpitz yanks his rebreather free from his face. The air within has gone sour thanks to a hit he'd taken during the last engagement. That must have been what the screaming ventilation fans behind his headrest were trying to tell him, he thinks, as he studies the data streaming in from his external sensors. Half of his remaining fighters were already beginning to have issues with their comm units, thanks to the strain of the extended battle. Nonetheless, he could still keep a firm grip on the situation, thanks to his telepathic abilities. "This is Alpha 6. We're falling starboard on Gamma Swarm's tail. We can't let them reach the evacuation fleet. You guys going to be able to handle the leftovers, Overseer? Over." "Roger, Alpha 6. Shouldn't be too much of a problem for my guys. Best of luck. Overseer out." Just as he is about to cut his connection with the human squadron leader, he receives a distressing call for help from one of his squadron's fighters. It appears a few of the Scribblers have learned a new skill: playing dead. They were now pursuing the lone fighter after it had swept through a cluster of dead looking for life signs. "I have Scribblers on my tail. I can't shake them." "Scorm, Alpha's at your 10. Just stay out of their weapons range. Overseer out." Before Horpitz could relay the request, the human fighter wing would raise their bows as they swung up and back over. They slid across one another with practiced elegance, getting themselves into the best positions for the engagement. At the same time, Scorm struggled to keep even a drop of discipline in his frantic race toward them. "Scribblers in weapons range. Alpha's engaging. Over." The newer crafts would sweep the space where the Scribbler swarms was pursuing Scorm, tearing the biological crafts into ribbons. Like satisfied raptors after a hunt, they swing back up and, before he knew it, would sweep across his canopy on their way back on their earlier trajectory. "Woohoo! Yeah! Thank you, Alphas!" Scorm's voice would screech over the rapidly deteriorating Nomad commnet. "Cut the chatter, Scorm. We still have..." "It's time to celebrate, Captain! We finally did it! We finally killed the Scribbler swarm!" Captain Horpitz glares at the solitary craft moving across the stars, shaking his head at the lack of discipline the young pilot portrayed. If the situations weren't so dire, he'd have the humans teach Scorm a lesson or two. However, all that hope would end as the unthinkable happens. Telepathic communications are typically safe for both the telepath and the target. There are rarely any side effects in ideal situations, the most common being the bleed. It occurs when a telepathic connection is established for an extended period with little to no rest. This results in the seepage and eventual flow of emotion and thought from target to telepath. Every ounce of joy, fear, pain, and desire of the target will be felt and experienced by the telepath. However, if the connection remained longer, the flow could become two-way, and the target and telepath could risk a melding of minds that will result in a unified consciousness. Fortunately, it has not yet reached that threshold. Scorm's comm unit failed only a little under 2 hours ago during the first round of engagements. But as Horpitz had been communicating with him, and many others, the threshold was quickly approaching. Horpitz mentally rode the tumultuous waves coming off his pilots and the few humans he could reach. At that second, as his focus lingers on Scorm, he feels as high as the elated pilot. But that high ceases without warning, as the space along Scorm's path tears open, turning him into dust. There was no death scream, no erratic turbulence, just a cold nothingness as the small dust cloud that was Scorm's remains followed the inertia of his earlier trajectory. There wasn't enough time for the onboard automatic control to override Scorm's path, but thankfully, there was plenty of time for the rest of Horpitz's fighters to pull away. The rupture rips the starry landscape open, forcing the edges of this reality apart for the bulbous behemoth that was the Queen to slip on through. The rupture shudders after having birthed the horror from her previous point in space to this one, sending turbulent gravity waves outward. The fiery hellscape, commonly referred to as strange space, that bridged the 2 points in space remains open as reality attempts to mend itself. Horpitz briefly gazes at the familiar starscape on the other end of the rift, catching sight of the barren alien world that had once been called New Eden. The first human extrasolar colony. His attention would not linger long on it, as it is drawn back to the horror delivered onto Earth's doorstep. The Queen was finally here, and there was nothing else they could do to delay her march starward. As big as a small moon, with a visceral surface riddled with various flesh sacs and rippling tendrils, the behemoth beast lumbers towards its next meal, Earth. The hundreds of thousands of flesh sacs across its surface slowly began to rupture as they launched more scribbler pods to strengthen the diminished swarm floating around it. Horpitz began directing his fighters into arcing trajectories away from the growing swarm and towards the Nomad fleet. Once the light from the Queen's arrival reached them, they'd be leaving Earth orbit and out of the system as fast as their ancient engines could take them. He watched as the scribblers took up a defensive screening posture around their mother, imitating the rings of the gas giant they were currently in orbit of. They were all still freshly birthed, and not capable of putting up much of a fight, but the Queen would sacrifice them to keep herself safe if she needed to. Horpitz has seen it done before. All fighters, regroup. We're getting out of here. There is nothing more we can do. Let's head back to rejoin the fleet. Hopefully enough humans have been picked up by now to make a difference, he sighs. However, before he could adjust his trajectory, one of his fellow pilots yelled out over the barely functioning communication net. Captain, I am spotting a lone human craft powering up within the swarm. I don't think they've seen him yet. I don't think their sensors have matured enough to pick him up. Horpitz checked his sensors, quickly finding the craft within the mess of biological flesh. A solitary, damaged human fighter craft, repowering its engines as it struggles to keep up with the Queen and her swarm. The craft's location so close to the Queen appears to have kept it both hidden and protected. Even if the swarm could detect him, they would not dare attack the craft for fear of hurting the Queen herself. It was not like the human craft had any functional weapons either. Its weapon batteries were charged, but the emitters were fused, and its missile magazines were empty. It could not take on one of the scribbler pods, let alone the Queen herself. Computer, identify the human craft's call sign. Call sign identified. UEF Excalibur. Excalibur? That's... Horpitz feels his life drain away as he realizes who is piloting the craft. He attempts an interface adjustment to open a communication channel with the human vessel. His communicator was on the verge of giving up for good due to a poorly maintained system that needed dire maintenance that could not be provided before the recent engagement. The Nomad's dwindling supplies and limited maintenance fields within their fleet had, thankfully, not yet caught up to him. He adjusts his mic so that he can still be heard, despite not wearing his breather. Officer Singh, what the hell are you doing? Captain Horpitz, nice seeing you out here. I thought you would have been dead by now. No, I am very much still alive. I am clearly more elegant than that ox you suggested might have been my ancestor. I never meant to offend you, friend. I hope you'll forgive me if I have upset you. Officer Singh, lucky, Captain. Come on, I thought we agreed. We're friends. So call me Lucky, please. Horpitz felt a strange calm begin to wash over him as they talked. A calm that he had long since forgotten existed. His mental walls were on their last legs, threatening to fall at the worst possible moment, to allow the flood of memories and emotional burdens to overwhelm him. But the calm coming in from Lucky seemed to help keep that eventuality further at bay. Lucky, please shut your engines off. Drift, and I will come and pick you up once the swarm passes. They won't attack you if you power your engines down and play dead. Sorry, friend. I can't do that. Not when there is still a chance. What chance? There is no chance left. You're weaponless. You can't do anything to slow her down. Shut your engines and drift, damn it. Lucky sighs softly as he watches the lumbering mass of flesh slowly pull further away from him. His engines were already strained to their limits, and his cooling system suffered irreparable damage during his last engagement with the enemy. His alien friend was right. There was nothing he could do to slow the monster that was now barreling for Earth significantly. His computer continued trudging along on the task he had set for it, allocating nearly all its processing power to run every possible simulation to find a viable method of harming the Queen. While it continued to work for him, he leaned back in his seat to ponder over the finality of his situation. His finger casually grazes over the switch that would shut his engines down, while his gaze settles on the time-worn picture of his wife and daughter, pinned just above it. He closes his eyes, biting back the lump in his throat. His chest grows heavy with each labored breath as he fights himself on his next decision. Either he fell back and allowed Horpus to save him, continue this pointless trek towards Earth alongside the Queen, waiting for a solution that may never come, or he grabbed the controls now and dived headfirst into the Queen's surface and barely made a mark. The struggle in his mind would clear as a memory surfaces. It was of the day the photo had been taken. He remembers just how cheeky his daughter had been, spraying both him and his wife with the squirt gun he got her for her birthday. He smiles sadly as tears roll down and across his rebreather. The decision seems so clear as his hands slowly move to the controls, but before he could enact anything, an alert pings. Solution found. He opens his eyes to study the readout intensely. His hand drifts from his controls to the small digital screen. His fingertip traces the newly crafted trajectory, and the weight on his mind slowly clears. It seems there was something much better he could do than what he was just about to commit to. He adjusts his mic before speaking once more. Sorry, Captain Horpitz. It seems I might not be able to shut my engines off just yet. Something has come up that I need to attend to. Good luck to you, friend. May you one day find peace on that field. He cuts the connection before Horpitz can respond, quickly inputting the necessary course corrections into his system. He winks down at his wife and daughter's smiling faces, reaching for the switch just above it now. He flips it, draining his weapon power banks into his engines as he resumes his course alongside the Queen. While making minor course adjustments, he began to feel an intense buzzing fill the inside of his mind. It was so fierce that he was forced to close his eyes momentarily. However, when he opened them again, he was no longer in the cockpit of his vessel. Lucky finds himself on a bench, under the warmth of a familiar reddish star. The faint twinkle of another larger star hovered close to the left. His attention is drawn to his right, as he picks up the familiar sounds of laughter in the distance. His daughter sat by his lonesome on a little hill in the distance. His wife is running down the endless grassy field to catch his daughter running ahead. The water gun he had gifted her earlier that day flies from her grasp as his wife finally catches her, sending them both tumbling down the gentle slope. This could all still be yours, human. To his left sat an unfamiliar woman. She was seated in the same spot his wife had been when he made her the promise of growing old together, watching their grandkids play and grow. The woman was dressed in a well-tailored business suit, much like the one worn by the frontier realtor who had sold him the land and the surrounding acres. A massive investment of his entire life savings and inheritance, so they can make their own little village out here on the frontier together, like their grandparents once had back home. She wasn't the realtor, though, and despite looking human, there was something a little off about her appearance. I doubt it. Who are you? You know who I am. We've been fighting for the better part of a year. Not specifically you and me, but I think you're starting to understand what I'm saying. You know your plan will fail, don't you? Do I? You won't stop me from devouring your worlds. It is just the way of nature. I am sorry, but it will happen, no matter what you decide to do. However, I might be willing to slow myself down long enough for your entire race to leave the system, before I begin devouring your cradle world. Oh? And why exactly would you do that? Honestly, I want to avoid any unnecessary scars if possible. Your craft will cut me up a little, but it won't do much else. Now, why don't you consider my proposition? It is beneficial to both of us. Most, if not all, of your kind will get to live in some other world, and I will have a nice meal out of this one. You can still have this, human. Let your mind join mine, and I will spare your people, and only chase the nomads as I've done for millennia. You won't return home, but you'll get to stay here with them, with your family. Don't you want to say hello to them? She motions towards Lucky's family in the distance, but Lucky avoids gazing back at them, feeling the ache in his chest and the lump in his throat to return. Don't you want to be with them? I do. I so badly do. He smiles sadly at her, shaking his head. Come with me, human. You can be with family. It is where home is. That's how the saying goes amongst your people, is it not? Home is where the family is? No, not exactly. You're close, though. Unfortunately, despite your generous offer, I can't agree to it. I remind you, human, you can't hurt me enough to stop me. You do this, and all you will get is a meaningless death, while I race forward to devour every last ship your species has before they escape this system. The woman growls, as a sickness seems to wash over the world around them. He hears the desperate screams of his wife and child in the distance, but he never breaks his stare. The ache in his chest now threatens to overwhelm him completely. They will suffer immensely for your defiance. No, they won't. He smiles defiantly back at her. But I will make sure you do, bitch. Lucky finds himself back in his cockpit, his fingers frozen over the controls, as alarms begin popping up over his displays. He quickly performs the necessary course corrections by hand, keeping his craft close to the Queen's mass to stave off the Scribbler's advance. Once he had his path locked in, he began working on inputting the path designated by his computer. His fingers danced over the keypad with confidence, as Horpitz and his ships kept a pace, watching from several dozen kilometers out. Error? What? Fuck. What's going on, Lucky? Talk to me. The systems won't let me input my desired flight path. I am trying to input code sequences to enact a jump at a specific point along my path, but the failsafes are stopping the computer from accepting the orders. Horpitz glanced up through his canopy at the swarm overhead. Their ugly forms danced with the grace of angels as they moved alongside the Queen. They were barely 5 seconds flight time away, but he could do nothing to come to his friend's aid. Is there anything I can do from here? Lucky stares at his display, at the error message still plastered on it. Horpitz's voice still called out over the radio, as the alien captain tried but failed to offer consolation to his current situation. He breathed out slowly, as the craft shook from slight turbulence brought on by the occasional gravity wave, pulsating out from the healing rupture in their wake. The picture of his family comes loose, and he quickly reaches for it, catching it before it gets stuck somewhere he couldn't reach in his current confined space. In doing so, his knuckles would brush across a switch, and a faint tune began to play. It was faint, but the volume steadily grew as the person holding the recorder adjusted their position. The piano keys kept going slowly but would soon stumble and come to a stop. Hey, why are you crying? I messed up. It's no good. You're doing well. Don't stop now. Remember, we're sending this to Daddy on his trip. You want Daddy to hear it, right? Yeah, I do. Lucky felt the tears coming forth once again, as he pulls the picture up to his face, staring at the smiles grinning back at him. What is this song called again? It's called Flying to the Moon, Ma'am. Hi, Dad. I am going to play it again for you, okay? What do you think, John? You think she can do it? Yeah, she can, he whispers, as he clips the photo back to its spot. His fingers worked on his keypad as the music began playing louder over his speakers. He was a born pilot, meant to fly the stars like his dad dreamed of doing but never could. As fantastic as his father was with the ancient F-35 fighters of old Earth, his mother was as brilliant with her keyboard and a warm cup of tea. He fought with his father's spirit earlier. Now he worked his mother's magic on removing the digital failsafes, preventing his plan from coming to fruition. The keys were being typed out to the pace of the tune his daughter played. Jump drives are amazing pieces of technology, developed solely by the human race. Every species comes up the same way when developing faster-than-light technology. Still, it was only the humans who surpassed where others failed, creating a new form of reality engine to bypass the hellscape, which was a strange space in its entirety. Where others like the Nomads and the Queens and countless others risked safety and sanity by traversing through strange space, human jump space was utterly harmless as she traversed another separate reality sandwiched between here and strange space. Unfortunately, with such technologies, there were still some restrictions similar to using strange space. For example, using the drive without locking in a destination, or utilizing the drive within a gravity well. In this instance, the presence of the Queen's weak gravity well prevented the interface from performing the jump Lucky desired. However, with the modifications he was making to his fighter's software, a loophole was being rung up that would allow the system to engage and send him through the heart of the Queen like a spear. His mind would buzz again as he approached the final code sequences. They will suffer for all eternity within me, human. I will flood the void with their eternal screams if you do not submit right now. You will fail. You will fail. The music would slowly end, just as the buzz weakened his hold on his mind. I did it, Daddy. I hope you liked it. I can't wait to see you when you get back. Come back soon, okay? Love you, Jan. We both can't wait to see you. I love you both, Lucky mumbled as his vision cleared. His screen was flashing the input confirmation warning, waiting for him to act. Captain, my friend, you still with me? Lucky? Yeah, I'm still here. What's going on? I'm going home, Horbitz. I'm gonna have to leave you now. Before I do, though, I am going to need some help. Whatever you need, friend. Lucky relays his request as quickly and as concisely as he could over the radio, as he watches his computer begin working through the new computations without the failsafes to stop it. As Lucky's fighter begins pulling away from the Queen, accelerating out and away from her, the scribblers would begin swarming their way towards him. However, at that same moment, Horpitz and his remaining fighters would begin a close, unified sweep of the outer flanks of the scribbler swarm. Enraging them, Horpitz would pull away quickly and draw the scribblers out and after him and his fighters. This provides Lucky with the window he needed. Accelerating at best possible speed, Lucky would race ahead of the Queen with engines on the verge of failure. Only luck and faith kept them in one piece, as they exerted power beyond their design specifications. Like how Alpha Wing performed earlier, he would bring his bow straight up and back over towards the Queen. He steadies his nerves, lining his craft up nicely with the front of the visceral mass barreling towards him. Meanwhile, the scribblers finally realized what was happening and began tumbling over and against one another as they struggled to get onto an intercept trajectory with Lucky. Free from the chase, Horpitz would race away with his fighters, relinquishing his telepathic connection after giving them the final command to run. He shuts his engines off, drifting his craft safely around to line himself up with the Queen and Lucky in the distance. Using every bit of energy he had left, he'd reach out across the void to Lucky. Lucky's calm would return as he watched the events unfold through Lucky's eyes. Daddy's coming home. Lucky flips the switch as he begins accelerating toward the Queen with as much velocity as he can pull out of his engine. As he approaches the jump point, the jump drive is spinning chaotically in his housing, threatening to rip the craft apart. Instead, something unimaginable happens. Pure white tendrils reach out from the rupture in Alpha Centauri, threading across strange space between the two ruptures in space. The fiery hellscape is silenced and replaced by a tranquil blue sea. The barren alien world shimmers through the rift as its green and blue color returns. Lucky's craft will sail right through the Queen as she struggles to pull herself away from the impact. Her last-second change in trajectory saves her from being pierced center mass, but Lucky's craft still does enough damage. He will continue, otherwise undisturbed, towards the rupture, while the Queen tumbles towards it in its wake. She suffered immense pain, screaming out in the ethereal nothingness of the void. Her scribblers seized from the psionic quake, twitching in place as their minds turned to slush from the pain their mother was suffering. He would vanish through the rupture, and with it went the heavenly calm that came when he engaged his jump drive. Horpus would continue to watch as the Queen and Scribbler Swarm were sucked into the raging fires of strange space, disappearing from this reality as the rupture mends itself in her wake. Goodbye, friend.